All right, what's going on, family? Scrapbook Boxing Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuffs Series. Let's continue with 100 years of world championship fights. Todd Morgan is to your right. He's the junior lightweight champion of the world. Mike Ballerino, he's to your left. And he was a champion as well. These two men, I told you before, they got it on December 2nd, 1925. And Todd Morgan had knocked out Mike Ballerino in vicious fashion. Beautiful left hook that was. Unbelievable. We talked about that fight, but I didn't show you the illustration, and I wanted you to have an opportunity to see that. So that's Todd Morgan and Mike Ballerino. Let's continue with some world championship fights. All right, Saturday, July 4th, 1925, Canadian bantamweight, 17-year-old babyface assassin Jimmy McLaurin had defeated 23-year-old flyweight champion Pancho Villa, 10 rounds, Oakland, California. It was a ballpark in Emeryville. Pancho Villa had just came from having a tooth extract earlier that morning. And he fought McLaurin. That was some fight that was. But he fought him that evening. July 14th, Pancho Villa would die from mouth infection. And it spread throughout his throat. And we're going to look at that article as well. But we're going to go in sequence. That puts me in mind of Ray Mercer when he was in the ring with Bert Cooper. I was at that fight. It was at Atlantic City on the boardwalk. And as a matter of fact, when Bert Cooper faced Ray Mercer, it was on the same night. In fact, it was the same exact day because I walked from one boardwalk to the other. Casino, from one casino to the other on the boardwalk. Vinny Penzienza faced Greg Haugen the same day that Smokin' Bert Cooper had faced Ray Mercer. So after I watched the Vinny Penzienza and Greg Haugen fight, I walked with Evander Holyfield over to the next casino, and that's where we saw Bert Cooper and Ray Mercer. Ray Mercer had just went, to the dentist earlier that day. And he had his tooth extracted. And when Bert Cooper hit him on the jaw, his mouth swelled up like a grapefruit. So this is what happened July 4th, 1925, with Jimmy McLaurin and Pancho Villa. I just thought that was interesting. In fact, that has happened plenty of times in boxing history. But it's unfortunate for Pancho Villa. He took the title away from Jimmy McLaurin. Let's look at that article of Pancho Villa, passed away just a few days after he lost the fight to Jimmy McLaurin, babyface assassin. Now here you have the babyface assassin, Jimmy McLaurin. Very young man, 17 years old at that time. Pancho Villa was 23. McLaurin is to your left, and Pancho Villa is to your right. And just shortly after, we're going to look at that article as well. Pancho Villa's last ring battle. Shortly after, Game Filipino Wright was defeated by Jimmy McLaurin. To Oakland, California. He succumbed to an operation. Pancho went into the bout ill. So he was having complications even before the fight. And he went into the fight, not himself. And eventually he wound up getting a mouth infection and he died. So let's take a look at that. Well, let's go in sequence. We're going to see another fight and then we'll take a look at that article. So July 14th, 1925, world flyweight champion Pancho Villa. He was a great fighter, great champion, dies at the age of 23. Of blood poisoning, an infection of the mouth. It was in a match with Jimmy McLaurin. We're going to take a look at that. He had a tooth removal, extraction, earlier that morning. He became champion in 1922. And he knocked out a fighter by the name of the Mighty Atom. And the Mighty Atom was something else, man. He really, really was. His name was Jimmy Wild. And he's very underrated, extremely underrated. Johnny Buff will wind up, a champion as well. But Pancho Villa had a record of 79 wins, 5 losses, 4 draws, 25 knockouts, and 20 no decisions. And he was born August 1st, 1901 in the Philippines, and he died July 14th, 1925. He was 23 years of age at the time of his death in the Philippines. Stood 5 foot 1 inch. He was a flyweight and had a 63-inch reach. He fought from 1919 to 1925. Now, he wound up having a total record of 90 fights, 77 wins, 4 losses, 22 knockouts, and 4 draws. He was in the ring with fighters such as Bud Taylor. They called him Charles Bud Taylor, Jimmy McLaurin, Frankie Gennaro, Pete Saramento, Mike Ballerino, Abe Goldstein, Johnny Buff, Jimmy Wild, just to name a few of the opponents that Pancho Villa was in the ring with. He was one of the greatest Filipino fighters, one of the greatest flyweight champions of all time. He had some great flyweights in history. But Pancho Villa is just underrated. He's overlooked. And it's a shame of what happened to him. But I just wanted to salute him, an outstanding fighter he was. Let's take a look at the original article. Now you're looking at the Pancho Villa scrapbook. This entire book is Pancho Villa. Every single article you can think of about Pancho Villa. In writing I don't even understand, from the Philippines, all over the world. But Pancho Villa dies, a victim of infection to the jaw. World Flyweight Champion succumbs. The operation, San Francisco Hospital. And like I said, what was amazing about him is that he came from the Philippine Islands and made something of his career. And he led the path to fighters such as Little Flash Yolarte, and of course Manny Pacquiao, to make the big money fights for small men. And you gotta give credit to Pancho Villa for that. As you can see here, a fortune of $200,000 made and squandered by Villa in few years. He was an incredible fighter, and I don't know what to tell you. They call him the Mexican Pancho Villa. He was some fighter. He really was. So unfortunately for him, he would die on that date. And we're going to move on with World Championship fights. We're going to continue. Let me just give a little tribute to him. Let me show a couple of more of his articles, just as a tribute to Pancho Villa. Like I said, this whole book is Pancho Villa. And I'm very careful on the articles that I do show. But everything you want to know about Pancho Villa, I have. Here, Pancho Villa and Abe Goldstein. He defeats Abe Goldstein, New York's Madison Square Garden. Pancho Villa and Johnny Buff. Pancho Villa beats Terry Martin. Let's look at that fight. And then we're going to move on. I'm not going to show any more pages of Pancho Villa. Here, Pancho Villa to your left and Terry Martin to the right. All right, I did his profile with you as well. Look at the other video, and I'll tell you about Terry Martin as well. Phenomenal fighter was Pancho Villa. So let's move on. Now, the New York Sack had a fighter by the name of Frankie Gennaro, and I'm showing you the article here, a successor to Pancho Villa. But the NBA and the New York Sack always had their conflict. From 1920 to 1921, when both of these organizations were formed. So, Fidel Barber was a coach sensation. They said, you guys are going to have to fight for this crown. So that's what we have here. We have the new American flyweight champion. And he's Fidel Barber. Here's Frankie Gennaro. 19-year-old high school boy. An Olympic champion. Spring's big surprise. Outpointing New Yorker in every angle. And they're talking about Fidel Barber. He was from California. He was just a fantastic fighter. He was an Olympian. And he won several titles in the amateurs, one of the best amateurs that you had at that time. So this is Fidel Barber, Frankie Gennaro. All right, let's move on. So July 13th, 1925, 24-year-old Jimmy Goodwin knocks out Stan Lasoizer. Now, Jimmy Goodwin stood 5'4" and he had a 65.5-inch reach. Stan Lasoizer was 20 years old. He stood 5'6". He had a fighting record of 29 wins. Didn't have any losses. Didn't have any draws. He had 19 knockouts. So he could punch. He'd become the lightweight champion of the world. It was for Benny Leonard's vacant lightweight championship belt. The Queensboro Stadium, Long Island City, in Queens. The referee was Ed Smith. He caused a 35-second round to Morgan. Now, who is Jimmy Goodwin? His name was James Edward. He was born July 30th, 1900, Scranton, Pennsylvania. Died September 24th, 1982 in Buffalo, New York. Stood 5'4" and had a 65.5-inch reach. He was a lightweight with a total bout career of 140 fights. 8 wins, 34 losses, 21 draws, and 12 knockouts. Now, Benny Leonard had retired in 1925. So Jimmy Goodwin would get the opportunity to fight for his crown, and he would now become the lightweight champion of the world.